Finally, there is some move in the right direction here. So, after over a year of flagrant violation of international humanitarian law by the Israeli government, including investigations by international bodies like the International Court of Justice, flagrant violation of US law as well as it applies to how the US is supposed to condition military aid, the US is finally signaling that it's going to put its foot down, potentially. I'll get to some of the wording in this, meaning an arms embargo on Israel if Israel does not comply to their requirements over the next 30 days. So I'm going to get to some of these details and what led up to this. So there has been discussions around this for a long time, really since February. There have been public discussions around how Israel has clearly been violating international law and in particular US law as it applies to NSM 20, which is the policy around how the U.S. conditions military aid. So, headline here from September 4th from Common Dreams here. Groups say Biden's own policy requires U.S. to stop arming Israel. Quote, international and U.S. law, as well as your administration's policies, including NSM 20, require suspending weapons transfers to the Israeli government. It is very clear, based on Israel's own actions, that they have been in violation of this, and the U.S. has been, regardless, still supporting them despite those clear violations. Most Americans, this from September 10th from The Intercept, most Americans want to stop arming Israel. Politicians don't care. So they cite several polls here, including one from June, a CBS poll that showed 61% of all Americans said the U.S. should not send weapons to Israel, including 77% of Democrats and nearly 40% of Republicans. Supporting Israel in their ongoing mass atrocity is not a popular position. AOC, this came yesterday, which may mean she knew this was coming or just coincidence here, but writing the horrors unfolding in northern Gaza are the result of a completely unrestrained Netanyahu government, fully armed by the Biden administration while food aid is blocked and patients are bombed in hospitals. This is a genocide of Palestinians. The U.S. must stop enabling it. Arms embargo now. Which leads to this story that broke today, just before the letter that I'll get to. From Common Dreams, Israeli NGOs implore world governments to prevent ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza. States have an obligation to prevent the crimes of starvation and forcible transfer, said 4 leading human rights groups based in Israel. Finally, this gets to the news. Barak Ravid of Axios breaking the story. Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin sent a letter on Monday to Israel demanding it takes steps within 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza in order to avoid consequences in U.S. law for U.S. military aid to Israel. See the letter here. So I read through this letter, and some of the wording, in particular one sentence, makes me raise some questions. I'll get to that in a minute. But the letter is, the intent here is to improve the dire humanitarian conditions in Gaza. And if they don't do that, then again, they risk supply of U.S. weapons to Israel, meaning an arms embargo. Now, this is under what I discussed earlier. NSM 20, countries that receive U.S. military aid and are in active military conflict must allow the transfer of U.S.-supported humanitarian aid without interruption, according to U.S. law and national security, in a national security memorandum signed by Biden in February, and failure to do so could lead to the suspension of U.S. military aid. And last March, showing you how long this has been going on, at least in terms of how it's been acknowledged publicly, last March, the Israeli government sent a written commitment to Biden that they will be abiding by the terms in the U.S. law and the NSM 20, and they have not been abiding by those terms. So this entire time, since March, there's been an acknowledgement by Israel that they are doing this, and they have not been doing this. And finally, now in October, there is a 30-day window here for Israel to comply. I'm not sure why it took this long, but we're still, again, this is moving in the right direction. I just don't, there is no justification for it having taken this long when they've been violating it this entire year. Now, In the letter, they go on to write, the amount of assistance entering Gaza in September was the lowest of any month during the past year. It's possible that's why this was decided on now, because things have not been improving in any way. To reverse the downward humanitarian trajectory as consistent with its assurances to us, Israel must, starting now and within 30 days, act on the following concrete measures. And I'll go on to discuss some of those in a minute here, but this is the wording that has me a little worried. They write, failure to demonstrate a sustained commitment to implementing and maintaining these measures may have implications for U.S. policy. I don't understand why this is may have and not will have. I know it seems petty, it's one word, but that word makes a difference. May have opens the door for the US not doing anything. Because it may have implications. No, why not will have implications if you do not abide by what we are asking. So again, I have to be skeptical here because it's been this long without any changes. So to finally see this, and again, a move in the right direction, I still have to question how committed they are to it when some of the phrasing seems a bit off here. But they go on to ask for a permanent transfer of aid trucks daily to the Gaza Strip, as well as through all 4 border crossings and opening a 5th border crossing. Also calling for humanitarian pauses to allow that aid to go through for at least the next 4 months. I'm not sure why there's a limit put on that. U.S. also demands Israel allow Palestinians to move east, away from the coastal area before the winter. Again, just showcasing how much power Israel has over the movement of Palestinians within what is supposed to be their own land. Blinken and Austin also demanded Israel ends the isolation of northern Gaza Strip and officially announced it has no policy of forced evacuation of Palestinians from northern Gaza. I touched on this in a video yesterday. Since October 1st, there has been no aid into northern Gaza. That may have changed now. I'm not sure where this aid went exactly. But CNN writing here, Israel appears to already be responding to the letter, at least indirectly. So just one day after the letter was sent, an Israeli agency that manages policy for Palestinian territories and the flow of aid into the Strip tweeted photos of aid going into Gaza. So, and to be clear, this is the front they want to put on, right? So they're going to at least publicly, in some ways, act like they are abiding by this, even if they may be abiding by this letter, but we're one day in. And other reporting, again, indicated that there was no aid coming into at least northern Gaza since October 1st. They're now implying that they are entering northern Gaza with aid. It's possible that changed yesterday. So again, forgive me for not trusting, these agencies after what we've seen over the past year. So I hope this is happening. I hope these steps are taken. That said, it seems very unlikely, based on what Netanyahu has been saying, based on what the Israeli government has been doing, that they're going to abide by all of the asks from the U.S. government. So if they do some of it or do a bit of it half-assed, is that going to be enough for the Biden administration to say, okay, that's fine, we're not going to impose an arms embargo? Because again, the language there is may. This may have an impact. I don't know. But again, I'm just looking at history and basing my assumptions off of what we've seen up to this point. My hope is that there will be a arms embargo, because I find it very unlikely that that Israel is going to completely reverse course on what they've been doing in Gaza. Also, this is a point worth mentioning. Multiple U.S. agencies, including the USAID and the State Department's Refugee Bureau, recommended ending weapons to Israel months ago for these violations. Blinken ignored them and lied to Congress about their findings. So, referring to this from this report from ProPublica that broke the story, September 24th, Israel deliberately blocked humanitarian aid to Gaza. 2 government bodies concluded. Antony Blinken rejected them. And now, finally, he is acknowledging the reality. The 30-day, there I agree with them. There should not be a 30-day window here. This should have been implemented months ago when it was clear that Israel was in violation of this. That said, this is their policy now. So we're gonna see over the next 30 days if there's going to be a shift, either by Israel or by the U.S. and their the way they discuss Israel as an ally, because up to this point they have been incredibly defensive of all of Israel's actions. I also think this potentially, looking at the upcoming election, because we're talking 30 days, that's past the election. This potentially helps Kamala Harris in her campaign if this is a way for her to finally discuss an arms embargo in a real way, where this is, she is the VP. This is now on the table. She should be willing, hopefully, to at least discuss this and have a bit of a shift towards her attitude when discussing Israel on the campaign trail, because that has clearly been hurting her campaign. We've seen polls tighten over the past month as she has turned to campaigning more towards, as the media calls it, the center. It's campaigning towards the right, embracing endorsements like Dick Cheney. Ever since doing that and trying to appeal more to conservative voters, her polls have come down. Because why would a conservative vote for Kamala Harris when they could vote for Donald Trump? The way you win as a Democrat is through turnout, bringing out more people to vote who would vote Democrat if they felt inclined to, if they felt like you were actually speaking to them. But Kamala Harris made the opposite turn, and it's been hurting her. So this could potentially be a way for her to signal a real change, especially when you have, this is a candidate who discusses her history in law enforcement and how important it is to, uphold what's right and uphold the law. Yet, why doesn't that apply to international law? This would be a great way for her to be able to differentiate herself from Donald Trump, who is a criminal, is a felon, and apply this sort of principle across the board. But so far, we've seen a complete failing of that, this unwillingness to criticize what is a government in Israel committing genocide and the U.S. support and funding of that. But maybe this will signal a change.